Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. Good to have you along, and great to have you here, not especially, I mean, I love you all, but also we're putting these videos up on YouTube, and it's great to see you. It's great to see you see me, and I would encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel as we continue to, get further into the video content of these conversations. I think that's kind of the thing that we're investing some good time and energy into. So thank you very much, everybody. Just subscribe to the show. I think that really helps, as well as sharing these episodes. When you share a show, when you share a conversation that we're having today or any other day, a shift break episode, it makes a ton of people who are previously unaware of Keys to the Shop aware. They open up the webpage at keystotheshop.com or the podcast player, and they discover there's almost 900 episodes that deal with a host of topics that will absolutely help them run a great coffee shop, help them overcome the challenges of ownership and management and training and anywhere in between. So sharing these episodes is caring. Sharing is caring. So thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. Now, the Keys to the Shop not only does one-on-one coaching and consultation for coffee shop owners who really want to elevate their operations, the excellence with their culture, their people, and quality, but also we've been offering these key holder coaching groups. The coaching groups are mastermind style meetings, 2 hours every time we meet. Over the course of 6 months, we meet 12 times in these sessions and focus on select member problems, opportunities, figure out solutions, and really bring our insights to bear on that person's situation to help them run a great coffee shop. It's a give and a take. 6 business owners, 6 coffee shop owners coming together on a regular basis in community. It's a beautiful thing. And we've run 2 seasons now of key holder coaching groups. And I think that it would be something that would benefit you. We're taking applications for this paid mastermind group starting in September. We're going to be launching the 3rd season of this thing. We've been doing it for a year, and it brings a ton of value and perspective, accountability, and community, like I said, to an isolating job. Being an owner, being a leader in general, can be very isolating, and having perspective and community is so valuable. So look for the application link in the show notes, or you can email me, chris@keystotheshop.com, and I'll send you the link to apply to be a member of this upcoming key holder coaching group cohort, this mastermind of coffee shop owners that help each other be successful and thrive as people while running their shops. So again, chris@keystotheshop.com. This episode is brought to you by Ground Control over at groundcontrol.coffee. The original brewer, the Cyclops brewer, has been turning heads and elevating coffee quality and really delighting palates for the many years now. SCA award-winning technology not only creates better batch brew coffee, but it also enables you to make batch espresso for iced lattes, batch cold brew. So there's a lot of different opportunities for your menu to open up with this machine. Creates a lot of efficiencies in the cafe. So if you're looking for a higher quality coffee product, if you're looking to equip yourself to stand out from your competition, then go ahead and check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. Learn more about this and see if this is the right fit for your shop. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Barista Series from Pacific. The whole plant-based beverages have been exploding on the scene in coffee, and the Barista Series is the original, the innovator. They are the foundation for plant-based performance beverages because it is made for baristas, tested by baristas before it even hits the shelves. It stands up to the heat from steaming. It creates amazing texture for latte art. It also, and maybe even most importantly, keeps the focus of the beverage on the coffee. So go to pacificfoodservice.com and get samples. reach out to them, get samples, try it for yourself. I think you're really going to be impressed by this, and so will your customers, your baristas. And I think it's a great choice. Again, visit them at pacificfoodservice.com. If you're looking for the best plant based beverages for your customers, then look for the Barista series from Pacific. Now, today we are going to be talking about a subject that I think is really fascinating, and I've seen the benefits of the topic that we're going to discuss here in many of the places that I have worked in my career. And I think you're going to find this just empowering, because the idea of owning your own building and owning your own property sounds very scary. I mean, at least if you're not used to reading a lot about real estate and the things that go on behind the scenes for property ownership, it's something that maybe you think it's not attainable for you. Well, today's guest is going to actually open up that whole conversation and make it easy to understand why property ownership is something that you should seriously consider for the benefit of you, your family, and your business. Today, we're talking with Paul Neal, who is the owner of Vantage Point Commercial Capital, and he is a trailblazer, really, in empowering business owners to create wealth, autonomy, and control by owning commercial space. And his new book, which is why we're having him on the show today, is called Un-Lease Your Business, Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by Buying Your Building and Firing Your Landlord. It delves into a transformative approach to commercial property ownership. And in this conversation, we are going to be discussing the advantages, the trade offs, the different things that go into owning commercial real estate for small business owners. Paul's going to share his passion for helping entrepreneurs own the spaces they operate, highlighting different wealth building potentials of owning real estate. And we're going to discuss the risks and benefits, including the ability to build equity, tax advantages, and the stability and control that owning your building provides. And timing is also something we're going to be talking about here. When is the right time? What financial factors should you consider? Like, is this right for me right now, or should I wait? There's a whole host of questions I know that's going to bubble to your mind when you come up with this. Oh, ooh, I never thought about property ownership. Well, hopefully we cover a lot of those things in this conversation. I think we do. Paul is masterful at this, and I'm excited for you to learn more. I certainly learned a lot, and I think this is going to be empowering, like I said. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Let's talk about owning your own property with Paul Neal. Hey, Paul, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How's it going?
Yeah, hey Chris, going awesome. Excited today. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this topic, and you have been just passionate about this topic of ownership and all of its advantages. And thinking so much of the audience right now is renting. And they have probably thought about ownership at some point. It feels a little mysterious, it feels a little risky. And here we are in this conversation to kind of shed some light on it. And I guess I want to talk a little bit first about how you found yourself becoming this champion of real estate ownership, especially among small business folks through Vantage Point and other areas of your career.
Yeah. Well, great place to start, I guess. So, I'm have been a business owner my entire life. I'm an entrepreneur by heart and nature. And I started my first business when I was in college with my wife, and 6 businesses later have had quite the experience. Some good times, some bad times, and mostly good. A lot of lessons learned along the way, and most of the businesses were in and around real estate and real estate finance, which is where I spend my life. And so this passion for entrepreneurs and business owners owning the space, the real estate that they run their business in, really sort of grew organically through observation. So with my experiences with different business owners, and it's really kind of my tribe, people we run with. And I noticed kind of two camps over time sort of emerge. You had the one camp that, and both successful business owners per se, but the one camp was the group that sort of went from lease to lease to lease, and they rented their spaces and didn't put a lot of time, energy, thought, or attention into this opportunity to buy a space. And for whatever reason, mostly distraction, ignorance, and that not being a bad word, just not knowing. It's completely different than buying residential real estate. And then the other camp that somewhere along the way the trigger flipped and they said we're going to buy, and ended up buying a space, the space that they run their business out of. And interestingly enough, the divergence of the two from a wealth perspective as time compounded on was pretty extreme, because of the asset that the camp that would acquire the real estate had versus the non-asset. So you had an operating business, but no real estate, versus an operating business with real estate. And so the advantages became obvious over time. But what intrigued me is why everyone didn't make the choice. And so again, a lot of it is an ignorance, not knowing. The commercial real estate and commercial finance world is completely different than residential. I mean, just about everybody's familiar with buying a home to live in, or maybe even some investment real estate for residential. It's pretty boilerplate, pretty plain vanilla. No matter where you go, they're pretty much, the markets are owned by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. They pretty much dictate the terms, and so the terms might be a little different from bank to bank or place to place, but it's pretty much the same process. But commercial is the Wild West. And so my passion was to learn that, understand it, synthesize it, and then educate entrepreneurs so that at least they could make an intelligent decision on, whether or not it makes sense for them to go that direction. And if it does, how to do it.
Do you find that now that you've made that such a study and you've observed even in more depth, that it's more available today to people than it used to be, or is it more difficult than it used to be?
Well, it's a little bit of a moving target because there are different influences in the market. Everyone in the subject will always come about interest rates and whatnot. Interest rates right now are higher than they've been in the last few years. So compared to 2-3 years ago, then a little harder than it was then. But that's also a moving target that will relax. That's heading in the right direction, it looks like. But as far as like availability of capital and programs and things like that, I would say that today it's a better opportunity than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Oh.
Because of some of the sources of capital and the programs that are out there that were in some ways not there, in other ways were there, but very obscured, very hidden, and you couldn't sort of ferret them out. And so if they didn't really exist to most people.
Okay, so now there's a availability, at least for first steps and paths you can go down for owning the building that your business is in, and more people can technically take advantage of it. There is still the inhibition that people have, like I'd rather rent. Maybe they're thinking that there's a lot more risk involved in ownership, and maybe I'm wrong in assuming this, but it feels like it's just an exchange of risk, but not, more or less than renting. Break it down for us a little bit more and tell us what is the advantage, or even maybe just the trade-offs of having a ownership mindset of your real estate versus renting.
Well, yeah, sure. There's risk. I mean, every day when you get up and get out of bed, there's risk. I had a deer for the first time in my life dart out of the woods the other night and ran smack into the car,
Ugh.
and I didn't see it. It came out of nowhere. There was risk. Could have been terrible, and because of that, I could like never drive my car again, or ever have a bad meal at a restaurant. May never eat out again. There's always risk, right? So it's a matter of managing the risk and being smart about it. A couple of things I would say. When you're considering the idea, the opportunity of owning the building, before we get into the benefits versus the pluses and minuses of it, but just from a risk standpoint, you have to be, there's a couple of like minimum check marks I think you have to be able to check. One being, it's not a good idea if you're a brand new business or in the first 2 or 3 years of business sort of growth and evolution, because you need to get your sea legs. You need to have a business
Mm.
that's got some history, that's got some stability to it, some profitability, and that you've weathered a few storms. You've figured out how to serve your customers and clients well, how to get them coming back and getting people to refer you. You need to figure out how to hire the appropriate staff, and when necessary, fire, to put in the systems and the processes and the advertising and everything that's involved with running a business. If you're a coffee shop owner, then that's one type of business, but you might have gotten into that because you love coffee, but there's a whole bigger world around that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and Michael Gerber addresses it in a seminal book, The E-Myth. Most people go into business because they're a technician and they think, well, I'd rather do it for myself than for old Larry over there. And they don't realize there's a lot more to it. And I know you get into that in your show regularly, and your consulting and that sort of thing. So you got to get all that stuff sort of at least to the point where, okay, we're consistent, we're predictable, we're profitable, and we have a runway ahead of us where we think, hey, we've got a good 7, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us in this space. We're in a good place business wise, family wise. This is what we're going to do. And so at that point, it's a good time to start considering it. So if you can't check those boxes, then you need to rent. That's your gig. So, as far as the risk, then it becomes at that point, owning, it's almost like, why do you buy the home that you live in versus continuing to rent your personal residence? I mean, the analogies are pretty similar. When you first start out in your working adult life, you're typically going to rent because you're kind of figuring out your career. You might be changing jobs a few times. You might be considering a family or getting married or whatever. But at some point, you make the decision, hey, I'm going to buy a house, because intrinsically that there's a lot of benefit in that. Number one, hey, you want ownership. You want a little piece of land that you can call your own. There's qualitative benefits there, right? You can put up a fence for a dog if you want that. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You can renovate a room. You can paint it the way you want to paint it. You can do what you want to do. But then there are quantitative reasons too. I mean, after you've been renting somewhere for a few years, you keep writing these checks to your landlord, and you see your rents going up year after year after year,
Yeah.
and you've got no equity. And then you look around and you see the real estate, the homes around you. Last year we're selling for $300,000 on average for a starter home. Now they're selling for $330,000, and then the next year they're going to sell for $360,000. And again, not a straight line up. We understand that with real estate and appreciation. It depends on where you are. But you can pretty much understand, and that over 10, 15, 20 years, most real estate is going to go up in value if you're in an area where people aren't fleeing. I mean, there are some areas that they are, for a litany of reasons, which we're not going to get into here today. But you hopefully aren't buying a house there either, because your property value is probably going to go down over time there as well. But when you own your home, you buy that first home, and every payment you make, you're building equity. You're paying down a principal balance, right? Hopefully, your property value is appreciating over time. You're locked into a fixed rate payment, so nobody can come raise that payment on you over time, like your rent can get raised every year. Nobody can show up after a couple of years and say, hey, Chris, we've decided we don't want to renew the lease here on this apartment. We're going to mow this place down and build a strip shopping center or whatever they're going to put there, or something brand new. You can come back in 18 months after we build the new building, and your rent's going to be 1.5 times what it is today, because we're going to put these amenities and all that. Nobody's going to do that. So there's tax advantages for owning your own home. Part of the interest you pay is tax deductible in a primary residence in America. You can also, as your family grows and your income grows, you can decide after a few years, hey, I think we're going to sell this house and we're going to buy another home. Maybe it's larger, and you're going to take the equity gain in that house, and you're going to use it for a down payment perhaps in the next building, and you're going to do it tax free because it's there's benefit in real estate ownership. Or maybe you're going to keep it and rent it to somebody and start building an investment portfolio and then buy the next house. So commercial is similar to a lot of that. It shares a lot of those parallels. And I'm gonna asterisk here and say commercial is it's a huge umbrella. So what I'm talking about when I say commercial, I'm talking to the coffee shop owner. I'm talking to the locally based business that has a need for a local presence, that has customers, patients, employees, a need to show up somewhere locally. that's not going to be Amazoned out. You're not a virtual business. We're not talking about giant Class A office building type real estate. We're talking about that little shop on the corner, that little building downtown that people are going by every day, and or the main street, or some location that you can plant your flag. That that is the commercial space that I'm talking about, where you're going to capture a lot of these same values. And we can dig in and unpack a lot of that here on the commercial space here. But I want to toss the ball to your side, so you can ask some questions, and then we'll unpack specifically some of those advantages on the commercial space.
What is the disadvantage of doing what you just said when you don't have yourself collected? You mentioned the threshold of having gone through some storms and having some years, and you know your business, and you made the comment, we're gonna be doing this for 10 to 15 years. That sounds like a statement of confidence that's very predictive, in that you can sense that we're making money, we're profitable. Is there a more specific threshold, financially speaking, numbers wise, that one could say, well, when you're profitable by X amount, or you can have some kind of an analysis or prediction of what you're going to make in the next number of years, and that will cover the expenses of your the acquisition of property, for example. But what's a little bit more finer point on the idea that you're ready to purchase real estate for your business?
Yeah. So obviously nobody can predict the future, but you do have a track record. And so one of the things that's important to know is, as of today, what are the trends for your business in the last year or 2 years from a profitability standpoint? What are you currently paying now for rent? And what are your debt obligations? And so we use a formula that basically says, we want to see um, your income, your net income after all of your debts are paid from the business, and after you take a salary.
Yeah.
We want to see that at least 125% higher than any monthly mortgage payment you would have.
Okay.
Okay. So you're gonna have a built-in margin of 25%, and that's after all the debts have been paid, and that's after the salary's been paid and whatnot. For a lot of owners, buying a space is what we call rent replacement, and so they're going to be giving up a rent payment to take on a mortgage payment.
Okay.
Right. So it's not going from zero to some mortgage payment. It's going from some rent payment they're already at now to a mortgage payment, which could be more, probably not going to be less, probably going to be more. But again, that if the numbers work today, where you are today, that's the first thing we look at. The next thing we look at is, do you have some cash reserves? Okay. Dry powder. So when most people think buying commercial space of any type, they get this idea, they go down to their local bank, maybe the lease is coming due in 60 days or whatever, and they talk to the banker who they set up in a relationship with originally when they set up their depository accounts or whatever, and they say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a building. And the banker, who is really in the business of collecting your deposits, they're really not in the business of loaning you large amounts of money. Although they say they are, but that's really not why they're in business. They're in business to get your money and then loan it out on a multiplier at smaller increments at higher interest rates, because that's
right. Yeah.
much less risk. So they're going to say, hey, Chris, sure, we can do this for you. We want 25% down, and we're going to do it on a 20-year term, and we're going to do a 5-year balloon. So every 5 years, you're going to have to requalify. The numbers are going to have to work there for that to work. Now that could be a bit like swallowing an elephant, because if you're looking to buy a $500,000, or let's just to make the math easy, $1 million building, you're talking about $250,000 worth of cash to get into the building that you're now sticking into the bricks and the mortar. So, which you're not going to get out for quite a while, right? So this is not a liquid investment. It's something that grows over time, and can be a large part of your retirement program. Which, as an aside, going back to that primary house, most of the wealth of retirees in America is in the value of their house. So if they never bought their house, they would not have the wealth that they have today.
Wow.
Just as an
Okay.
aside, same thing with businesses. When you go to sell a business, um, you've got an operating business, you may have a customer base, so you might be able to get some multiple for it, but lenders look at that as blue sky for the most part. So if you have real estate, it can be worth a whole lot more. Different um, conversation, but um, so what we suggest and what most people don't realize is you don't have to put 25% down on a building. If you have a business that is meeting the financial numbers, it's cash flowing appropriately, it's growing like we've talked about, then you can get in for as little as 0% down. We see 5 and 10% all day long. 10 is kind of the golden standard. If we can hit 10, then that opens up the doors to everything. But that's a wide variance from $250,000, down.
Yeah.
And so even if you've got the 250,000 in this example, in our opinion, in 9 times out of 10, it makes more sense to keep the bulk of it in your operating account, not in the bricks and mortar of your building. Get in with the least amount that makes sense. So you're leveraging other people's money, but you have all this dry powder or emergency reserves. So back to your question on when's a good time. Number one, you have to have a consistent track record. You've got your systems working. You've got repeat business. You've got consistent cash flow, and now the numbers are working financially. And number two, you've got some cash reserves in the bank because it's going to take some down payment. It's going to take some backup money just in case, whatever happens. So those are sort of the key indicators. There's not a hard and fast rule of saying you have to have a certain amount in the bank or a certain amount left over. It varies based upon the growth of your business, the speed of your business, the location you're in, and your comfort level. Because some people are like really risk averse and some people are open to some risk. So based on where you fall in that spectrum, can determine how much money you want to put down, how much margin you want on your financial, and also whether you actually move forward on or not. Because some people are so risk averse, they just want to lease, and of course they're willing to do that, but there is risk there because if you don't get a lease renewal, you might have to move your coffee shop, and
And
then
yeah, happens all the time.
yeah, and then now what happens to your clients, your employees? You might have to rebuild from scratch. I had a client that's has owned a couple of pizza restaurants, had them for 8 years, put $80,000 in the kitchen in one of them, and got a knock on the door. The landlord said, "Hey, Osmond, we're going to sell the building." So, what's he going to do? He's a pizza restaurant. People don't drive 30 miles to go to a pizza place. They drive 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4, right?
Yeah.
And so his whole livelihood has been here. So now he's got like 60 to 90 days to find another location if he can. That's a restaurant like location, build out the kitchen the way he wants it, try to get his staff to go over and capture as many of his customers as he can. So that's a major cost and a major risk. Now, fortunately, we were able to help him buy the building. He was able to make an offer and they sold it to him. But that's not always the case. So sometimes when you try to avoid risk, you actually are putting yourself in risk's way.
Mm.
Not to mention the opportunity cost. There's a cost to move into a building. There's a big opportunity cost to not move into a building. But you mentioned confidence. Confidence is important. I mean, if you're in business for yourself and you're not confident that you're going to be successful and make it, in the long run, then definitely don't buy a building. In fact, you might want to seek, guidance on how you can raise your level of confidence. If it's you don't have good customer, you don't have consistent customers, you need to figure out how to get that thing done so you have confidence that, hey, this is going to continue on. And so those are important sort of qualitative factors to put in line before you go jumping into a building.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think the risk of what others can do to you is just one of the primary things that I hear about all the time. Hear about it from clients, you hear about it on forums, just like the pizza restaurant. And you're purchasing long-term security. And I even told a client this morning, just something as simple as going from a trailer to a brick and mortar. It was letting her know, you need to bet on your own success, meaning, what if people actually want to order a lot of what you're offering on the menu? What are you going to do then? So in a very simple way, that means we have to have capacity. And
Mm-hmm.
so I imagine the same, of course, is true when it comes to space. with space planning. If you're purchasing a building, that building is going to maybe even not be exactly what you need, but it may become what you need if it's larger than your current capacity, based on the confidence you have in the growth of your business.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, a popular strategy is, again, you have to understand where you are today, but you also have to understand your vision for the next 3, 5, 7 years and a plan, and have a reasonable expectation that you think you can get it. I mean, nobody's
Hmm.
planning is perfect, but you're like, okay,
Yeah.
we feel like based on where we've been and the market, we know people are moving to our area. It's a popular place. I mean, we think we can grow by 10, 15% over the next year and compound that out, or whatever that number is. So, a popular strategy is to find a space larger than you need. And so we just literally closed like 2 or 3 weeks ago on a new, this one's new construction, because that's an option too. Um, this client, Adam, is a high-end remodeler. And so he needed about 8,000 square feet. And so he's building a steel building. It's a flex warehouse space,
Yeah.
and he's currently renting another space, but he's building this building, and he's going to occupy 8,000 feet. But he thinks that over the next 5 years, he's going to need 12,000 feet the way he's growing. And I wouldn't be surprised, but no one's got a crystal ball, right? So, what he's done is he's found two other tenants to take the remaining 4,000 feet. He's gonna subdivide the 4,000 into 2,000 square foot bays. Okay. And based upon the market rents of the area where he's located with that type of building, the rent that he's getting from those two tenants will pay about 90% of the freight of the entire mortgage. So he's going to go from a lease where he's paying everything himself to a mortgage on a new building where 90% of it's paid for. So it's going to be a less out the door. And oh, by the way, if his plan is right and he continues to grow and he needs to expand his business, he can either go buy or building or rent or whatever a building somewhere else, or he can knock on the door of one of his tenants and say, you know what, I don't think we're going to renew your lease. You got 90 days because I need the space. And that's his prerogative. He owns the building. He's the landlord, and so he can expand. So he has a plan kind of built in either way. He can expand into the space, or he can just let them stay there or whatever. He could theoretically too, if he grew fast enough, um, rent the 8,000 square feet he's in and go buy another building or build another building. And so now
Sure.
he's got additional commercial real estate. What a lot of people don't realize that have like residential rentals is, with commercial, you're not plunging toilets and getting calls on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, because commercial doesn't work that way. And commercial tenants are longer term,
Yeah.
tenants, and even a lot of times you can set a lease up as a triple net where they pay everything. They pay the taxes and insurance, and they pay the maintenance, and they do. So it's just like, this is like the golden egg right here. So
Mhm.
that's a strategy you can buy, or you can say, well, Chris, I think this part of Louisville is a great area, and our coffee shop is thriving here. And we figured out the culture, we figured out the marketing, we figured out the menu, we've got all the systems. And so we're going to buy a building here that's about the size of the space, because we don't want to make this any bigger. But what we want to do in 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, we want to put another coffee shop just like this. We're going to franchise our business or expand our business, to a different part of town that has a great demographic, and we think it would be as successful as this one. And maybe that's a pilot location that they rent that space while they own the home, the mothership here, and then eventually they buy that building and so forth. We had a
Yeah.
dentist that did that with 5 locations in our metro area. Now he's got
Sure.
5 buildings and 5. He hired 5 dental students right out of school who are always looking for jobs, right? And um, so forth. And there's a lot of PhDs out there that you could probably hire for your coffee shop that are looking, in philosophy or something for for a job.
Ouch. Ouch. Yeah.
I say that
All the,
jokingly and in tongue in cheek. I live in a college town, so
of course, of
everybody's got a
course.
PhD.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Everyone's got the doctorate in poetry.
yeah.
I think that one thing that might come to mind as we hear about this is the well, I don't want to say hassle, I suppose, but it does sound like I just want to own a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And am I now becoming a landlord that has to spend all their time? It's already hard enough for people to, do all the admin work that they maybe didn't anticipate becoming a coffee shop owner because they just love coffee and love people. And surprise, surprise, now they're spending a lot of time with their laptop. So now that we're going into the realm of ownership, it seems like there's a lot more a shift of identity and workload that has to happen on my end that feels a little overwhelming. So I think maybe I'd like to hear a little bit about first what we should be prepared for in terms of the load that we're taking on, and second, what is the kind of like legal structure and other considerations, structurally speaking, that we need to implement so that this thing is not just a bunch of an uphill battle, but it's structured in a way that actually ends up working for us instead of us working for it.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, in terms of what you're signing up for, well, if you just own it yourself and you don't have any tenants, then it's really not much different than owning your house. Okay, you make a payment every month, or you can set that up for auto draft, and you've got the same AC systems essentially you do at home. You got the same, electrical, plumbing, and all that. So theoretically, you could have an issue there, just like you do as a tenant. So instead
Yeah.
of calling the landlord to fix the AC, if they're responsible for it, you'd call the AC guy. Okay, he'd come out and do it. Same thing with the plumber. If you're in a triple net lease, then you got to do all that anyway. So it's the same deal, no difference. Um, so it's not really different. If you have tenants, then, and again, we're not talking about a 20-story office building, right? We're talking about a small space that you own. Um, if you have tenants, you can even get a management company. You don't have to be the landlord if you don't want to be the landlord. There's management companies all over creation for a small percentage, a couple, like generally 7-8%, will take care of it. They'll take every phone call. They'll intercede for you. You don't have to do anything but just manage the management company.
Hmm.
And in fact, they can be your management company because the way you're going to structure it most likely is you're going to form a new LLC, an entity. We'll call it 123 Main Street USA. That's the real estate. You're going to own it, but that LLC is going to own the building. Okay.
Yeah.
So this LLC owns the building. And then this over here is your other business, which is another entity. Maybe it's an S Corp or an LLC or whatever. That's your operating business, your coffee business. So your operating business that you also own separately is going to sign a lease to your real estate company. So you will become a tenant, but ironically, you're also the landlord. So if you want to do something in the building, you could just go to the mirror and ask the landlord, and he or she will give you the answer.
So convenient. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so convenient. So now the cool thing is on the evil side, Mr. Landlord, you get to raise the rent on your tenant, which is your good guy side, every year, just like if you were signed up onto a lease with somebody else. So you build in rent increases just like you would in the market. And what happens is you pay your real estate company rent at a market rate. By the way, consult your CPA. I'm not a licensed CPA, okay, for specific tax advice. But your real estate company has some tax advantages, and you're going to do something called depreciate the value of that building. And so you get tax advantages of appreciating the building and also of raising rents on yourself. It's kind of a beautiful setup. And so they're two separate companies and entities. One owns one rents from the other, but you own them both. So that's generally how we structure it.
Hmm.
And we suggest when we get your legal counsel involved to structure it. And most people are like, yeah, that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. And you're paying yourself rent.
You're paying yourself rent. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And so as you pay yourself rent, so instead of, cussing your landlord every time you write the check, particularly when you start getting, maybe you started in a small, like you said, a trailer, and then you expand into a larger space, some of those rent checks can get pretty steep, right?
Yeah.
And, it's generally outside of payroll, the biggest expense that you're going to have. So think about this idea, right? So my friend Kathy is an OBGYN, and she bought her building about 15 years ago. Her not competitor, but one of these larger groups came in and said, "Hey, we want to buy your practice. We want to roll it into our practice." She's approaching retirement. She's like, "This sounds like a good deal." So she agreed to sell her practice to this larger entity, negotiated being able to stay on as a physician for a few years because she's not quite ready to retire. But the biggest thing is this: she paid off her building in about 13 years. In addition to that, the building is appreciated. It's now, I don't forget what she paid for it, but it's worth probably $2 million today. Okay. So she didn't pay 2 million for it 15 years ago. So the new entity though is paying her rent because they don't want to move the business out of there because all of her patients are used to coming there, all of her staff and employees are used to coming there, and they just wanted to own the business itself. And so she's got a stream now of a very nice retirement income just on that one asset, like a 5-figure stream of income coming into her for as long as she wants to rent them the space. And so the point is that 15 years would have passed either way. She was stroking rent checks every single month, or actually it was on auto pay, right? So you don't even think about it. But she could have been making somebody else rich, her landlord, but she ultimately made herself rich because now she's got this asset that she's drawing a retirement stream of income on in addition to the sale of the business. Because a lot of times a coffee shop owner might want to do it for 10 or 15 years and sell the business if it's productive and successful. I mean, the one down here, my little one downtown here, where I live, is an awesome coffee shop, and it's been around for 35 years, and it's always busy. And what a valuable business! And I know they own the building. I guarantee they own the building. Okay, I haven't asked him yet, but we've only been living here a short period of time. But I will get to that. But so now you have this asset as well, or you don't. So it's like, okay, wow, I've got this thing that's worth, in her case, $2 million. She could sell it and take the full 2 million if she wanted to, and take a capital gain, or she could sell it and roll it into other real estate if she didn't want to own the building and do what's called a 1031 exchange. She could do some other interesting things with it, or she could just keep it, let it be a retirement stream for as long as it can be. And then one day when she passes, if she wants to keep it, she could pass it through to her children and at what's called a stepped up basis. And so they don't pay capital gains, at least as of the tax code now, today, as I understand it, could change. But now they've got this great asset that they can use as well. So my point is if it makes sense, if the numbers make sense and you think you're going to be there for a while, then it's something you should at least consider, because the cost of inaction, the opportunity cost, while there is risk, I mean, there's also risk of signing a 5-year lease. Most landlords are going to want a personal guarantee on a 5-year lease. So if something goes south, they don't just let you off the hook. I mean, it's at least if you have a building, you have an asset you could turn around and sell, or rent out to somebody else. You don't have to stay in there. I mean, your business doesn't have to stay in there, so it gives you, again, some control and some flexibility that you don't have as a tenant. Again, your business goes south and you've just signed a 5-year lease. You've got 3.5 years left in the lease. For whatever reason, it's not performing anymore. You might not have the opportunity to go sublet that. They might not let you do that. Depends on who the landlord is.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a lot of opportunity here to both stay there and have it be this business that lasts decades and decades. You're the one that's operating it. Your children might take over for you. A lot of family-run businesses do this, pizza places, and they've been around for 100 years and it's in the family because they own the property, and they probably, because of that, own other property as well that helps them sustain their business even when business is low. It's not that they're just investing in that one property. They now have other properties that can help. Maybe sounds like maybe under the same LLC that you have the property that started it all, but also other properties that help create some stability for you and your family.
Yeah, I mean, you can structure it legally a lot of different ways with one LLC or multiple. Um, but most of the time, people that see the advantage of owning real estate and the tax advantages, the equity appreciation, the depreciation benefits, the leverage.
Yeah.
Once they do it once, you're right. They want to do it multiple times. We had one that bought a 2-story building, and she had one of these internet marketing companies, and she didn't really need all the space. She thought she did, but she didn't. And so she turned the upstairs space into these co-working suites. Okay. Well, it became a cash cow
Oh, of
because
course.
it
Yeah.
was, in a smaller town, and, a lot of people work from home. And so, hey, here's an opportunity to come in here and you can work here. And so she did so well with that she bought a small apartment building and then renovated that, and turned that into a cash producing asset. And so you see it a lot. And the funny thing is, here's the funny thing. The funny thing is, like, people will, in many cases, want to get into investment real estate. They'll read a book on it or whatnot, and they'll go out and they'll want to buy apartment buildings, or they'll want to buy like single family residences and all that. And that's all good, and we finance all that stuff. But in those cases, you're going to need 20 to 25 to 30% down in every situation. But they don't realize that they've got this business under their feet. They could get into the space, and they're their own tenant. They don't have to go plunge somebody else's toilets and do all that stuff. And they can do it for 0 to 10% down. So less leverage. They're already paying the money out in rent. And it's just an opportunity they don't know exists for them.
Sure.
So, but yeah, real estate investment is huge. That's one of the best sectors. I mean, if you look, I think the quotes go that most wealth has been created there in the United States. And there's a lot of good books out there, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and a lot of people that reference. And is real estate perfect? No, it's not perfect. And, and it depends on where you are. It depends on the type of real estate. It depends on when you buy it. Like right now, interest rates are higher than they were the last couple of years. But the good news is, if you buy a building, you've locked in the price. And if interest rates do come down, which we expect them to do, you can always refinance the building.
Right.
So you can reduce your payment there.
There's a lot to be said here. Getting down a little bit into the world of coffee, we talk a lot about the supply chain and the stability of different parts of a supply chain individually provide stability for the whole. And if you own your own property and you've got an upward trajectory, you're profitable, and it's a year over year increase, et cetera, it provides a stable demand for a product that is provided year over year, and it's not likely to go under, versus the one who has maybe more risk from being evicted from their space because the property got sold. And there's a lot of churn of small businesses that encounter those types of things. So if you can do it, then I'm glad for folks like you who are out there educating them as to their options to create more stability, not just for their own business, but really, if you think about it from a larger perspective, it's an industrial stability issue as well. And I was interesting to hear you talk about how, this, the OBGYN has got a customer base. They're not going to move from that location. People have developed a habit and an association of a geographical location and attaching meaning to it. Coffee, of course, is the exact same thing, maybe even more so, because that's the place we go. So there is a value of place and controlling the geographical space of your business, because it's not just that the bricks are so nice or the sidewalk is the color you like. It's the fact that people's association, their mental real estate, is wrapped up in your physical real estate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the experiences they have there. I mean, I think I would have I know I've never been to an OBGYN personally, but from my wife tells me, the experience of going there is nowhere near the experience of going to my local coffee shop. As I look forward to it, I'm like, to your point, it is part of my mental map, my mental real estate. And I go there and I see
Yeah.
the same people. And there's an energy and an enthusiasm. And it's, if they were to move it across town because they had to, it just wouldn't work for me as well. And so
Yeah.
now, to your point, I've got these habits that are built, these neural pathways that are now broken. And so now I've sort of, broke me out of my habit and my consistency. And now, like, okay, I'm open to do something different, which doesn't really bode well with the coffee shop, because now they have to find more people like me wherever they're going to go, and reestablish all that. And that's not easy to do. It takes time.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I think, this idea, we talk about culture, and you're going to have, and coffee shops, and you're the expert here, but I think each coffee shop has kind of its own culture. Each business has a culture. Each, like, sporting teams have culture, and I think culture drives everything. So you're going to attract a certain client to your coffee shop based upon that culture, and part of that is the geography. Part of it is the experience in the space. um, how it's decorated, how it's laid out,
Yeah.
how your employees greet the staff. Do they, I mean, do the customers, do they interact with them? Some coffee shops do special things like poetry nights, to represent
Yeah.
some music. The one I go to they actually make food too. Got a pretty extensive menu, which is awesome, because I can do breakfast, and even if I hang around long enough, lunch. Um, so all of that is critical. And if you've got that, you've got a culture. Once you have a culture, that's where you're like, okay, this thing has got some legs. This has got some stability.
Yeah.
We've got a future here, and that's when you really need to think about, somehow planting the flag.
Well, let's talk then, as we wrap up here, about a practical next few steps for people who have maybe gone through a mental checklist as they've been listening, thinking, well, gee, that sounds like me. Sounds like something I should be doing. What do they do next?
Yeah, I think first step is you need to make sure your financials, your financial documents are in order. So if you don't have, a good CPA or an accountant, you need to square that piece away, because what we're going to look at is the last 3 years of your personal and business tax returns. Okay. We're going to look at trends. We're going to look at, the most recent year is the most important, but we're going to look at trends. You're going to need what's called a personal financial statement that you've probably never done before. You don't need that to go buy a personal real estate. Essentially, it's like a profit and loss and a balance sheet on your personal life on one document, and that really just kind of shows your income, your debts, your assets and liabilities. So the kind of liquidity you have and that sort of thing. That's step one. Get your financial house in order. Step two is to just really start educating yourself on it and go deeper. I mean, we had a good conversation here, but there's so much more. Um, I wrote a book on it, and I would say, not tote my book. I don't make any money on it. You can go to our website, get it for free. And it's not Moby Dick. It's an hour and a half with a cup of coffee in your favorite coffee shop, and you can read it, and it will talk about a lot of what we talked about, but in more in depth: the pros, the cons, when's a good time, when's not a good time, the pitfalls of the process, how to get prepared, the loan options that are out there, because there's a lot of ways you can do it to skin this cat, what to expect in the process, what's the timeline. And I would also say that is important to understand in the early stages, is the timeline. So this process takes a while. It is not. It doesn't have to be like super involved on your part, because I know you're already very busy.
Right.
But there is a timeline. Like, for instance, when you negotiate or work with a commercial agent to negotiate the purchase of a space, um, from the time you sign a contract, it's probably 90 days before you're going to close. It's not like you're going to buy a house in 30 days. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Um, And if you're not buying the space you're physically located in now, which could be a great opportunity. I mean, if your seller will, if the tenant will, or the landlord will finance it for you, that's a home run. And like 90% of the time, because you can get really good terms, it's easier and so forth. But if that's not the case, you're going to have to find property, and that's going to take anywhere from a month to 6 months. If you want to build something, add another 9 months on that, maybe 12. Okay. So you've got figure 6 to 12 month timeline, maybe even 18 months before your lease comes due. You really need to seriously be thinking about this and doing some research, some homework. And because we get calls all the time, my lease is expiring in 30 days and I'm in this contract. And we look at it, we're like, can't really help you. You signed a contract that's not a good contract. And, you've got 30 days, which is impossible unless you're going to write a check for the space.
Yeah.
Nobody will fund commercial loan in 30 days. And so you need good guidance. So that's the last point. And that's what we do. You can source it, I'm sure, somewhere else, but our whole focus, Chris, is to provide the education. And so it's through a process where we investigate first off to understand your business, where you are, where you're going, your financials, the track record, what you're comfortable paying, what you're capable of paying, and then what skeletons do you have in the closet? Right, everyone's got some skeletons.
Yeah.
You're not going to hide. You're not going to hide anything from a lender today. Not a thing. You don't want to play Jack in the Box because that will blow up, 2 weeks before you close, and then you have bigger problems than if you ever went into the process. And so we like to uncover those because most of the time that can be mitigated up front if we know about it. We're like, okay, yeah, you had this happen. Here's how we address it, and we're up front and not an issue. So once we do all that and underwrite it, then we present options and say, okay, there's this national market of money available. We have private banks, private lenders, family offices, venture capital, local banks, you name it, lots of insurance companies that have money. And so based on your specific situation, what you're trying to buy, how much money you want to put down, all that, here's 3 or 4 options for you. And here's the pros and cons of each. And, oh, by the way, very important point. If you're married, early, you need to make sure your spouse is on board with the idea. Okay. And that's one of the things, that's one of the boxes that we check really early because we've seen it before. Like they get a week out of closing and the unsuspecting spouse didn't know anything about this. And they're like, you're going to do what?
Wow. Yeah.
So all of that. And then at that point, if you're like, it still makes sense and it looks good, then you engage with the commercial realtor. We can either connect you with one, or if you know one locally, to help find the right space for you. And because you're not going to find it on Zillow, they don't exist out
Right.
there. Most of them are not even listed on the market. So you need some specialization there. And then we move on to funding the deal. So that's kind of the way it works.
Sounds very thorough and great. I wonder where we can find more information about your book and your services.
Yeah, if you just go to ownyourbuildingnow.com, ownyourbuildingnow.com, you get a copy of the book. We do charge like $6 to print it and mail it to you, but you get a hard copy. Yeah, and then you can through that, you can also schedule a 15-20 minute strategy session with me or my team just to kind of see if it makes sense at a high level at the stage or not for someone,
Yeah.
for you. But at least grab a copy of the book if you're at all interested, because again, you can learn in one place a whole lot about the process and what's involved before you put your big toe in it.
Beautiful. This has been really helpful, Paul, and I appreciate you breaking this down for us. This is going to be huge for so many people, and thank you for all your wisdom.
Yeah, hey, it's my pleasure, Chris. I enjoyed it. I love talking about it. I like to help entrepreneurs win. That's what we do, man.
Okay, everyone. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. Paul was great talking about this subject that can be a little bit of a mystery to us. And I'm grateful for Paul taking the time to break it all down in ways that we can understand. I hope that's what you leave with, is more understanding. A couple of websites you can go to here, paulneal.net. You can learn more about what he offers here in the podcast, which is called the Brick and Mortar Money Show. And I think that would be great for you to subscribe to. So again, paulneal.net. And then also Vantage Point Commercial Capital's website, vpc.capital, is a great place to go as well. Definitely get that book. Go buy that book on Amazon. It's called Un-Lease Your Business. And the kind of just the takeaway for me here today is that once you get to a certain point in your business, and maybe this is the right thing for you right away, but especially this idea of as you get to know your business and understand, hey, this thing has legs, it has the ability to continue going. And part of the security of this business, what this business needs, is security. And just the haunting nature of leasing and knowing that maybe there's a rug that's going to be pulled out from underneath you. This is not trying to scaremonger or anything like that, but it's a legitimate thought and a due diligence that you need to consider. Even if you decide against it, at least you know that you've considered all the options. And I think leasing is just one of those bygone conclusions that people say, well, I'm always going to rent, I'm always going to lease. But maybe you don't need to. Maybe this is the right thing for you. And now you have steps that are solid steps, understanding that you can use to get to that point and not just assume that leasing is the only thing that you can do. And it's thanks to our guest, Paul Neal. So, again, check out that book, go to those websites, and continue to learn more. And a huge thank you again to Paul for joining us on the show. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me about today's episode, go ahead and email Chris, CHRIS, at keystotheshop.com. That's also where you can reach out if you're interested in working one-on-one with me to help you as a coach, as a consultant, to help you improve your coffee shop, to help you grow, to profit, to improve your culture, quality, and fine-tune your operations. These are things I work with people all the time on, currently and in the past, and this is something that might be the right fit for you. So you can reach out there, as well as inquiring about this key holder coaching group, this mastermind group of business owners that are here, in a focused way, meeting over 6 months to just help each other succeed, create community, accountability, work through problems and issues and things like that. It's been so powerful this last year. And this paid mastermind group is transforming lives and businesses. And it's beyond what I wanted it to be. When we came out with it last year, it really was like, I hope this goes well. And right from the first meeting, I was like, I couldn't be more pleased with how it's going. And I really would like you to be a part of it. So to fill out an application to be a part of the key holder coaching groups, we're going to be selecting people for the groups come September. I'd like for us to have more groups and more people. So we have 2 groups meeting right now simultaneously. We're probably going to have close to 4 or 5 groups happening in the fall, in September. And that might be something that is right for you, like I said. So Chris at keystotheshop.com. And also, if you follow Keys to the Shop on Instagram, it's in the bio, the link there in the profile. You can follow it there as well. But just reach out, and I'd love to, have a conversation and see your application come through for the opportunity to be a part. So with that is the end of our episode. Thanks so much. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, and share these episodes. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.